Hello, and welcome to another weekly Score Sheet podcast. This week I'd like to talk about the importance of depth to your Score Sheet fantasy baseball team. There's a fairly common saying among Score Sheet owners that whomever gets the best player in a trade wins the deal. What that saying is talking about traditionally is a multi-player for one really good player deal. Now I agree that early in the off season in a keeper league, if you're packaging 4 or 5 mediocre players to get one really top player to protect, then generally that statement is true. Whoever gets the best player has won the deal. But too many people, I think, carry that same idea over to in-season trades. They're willing to trade their starting second baseman, their starting shortstop, and their backup infielder, all for one better second baseman. And the problem with that, of course, is that you run out of depth. Look at all the injuries this year, for instance. We're only 7 weeks into the season, and almost every fantasy team has lost 2 of their top players for at least some portion of the season. Many teams have lost half their starting lineup for a period of weeks. If you don't have some depth, then you are stuck playing some really miserable players on your team. While it is true in Score Sheet that you are allowed unlimited use of anonymous minor league players, those AAA players bat at a clip of about a 150 batting average or have ERAs in the 7s or 8s. You know, there's a pretty big difference between even a really bad backup and a player who's hitting 150. In fact, it's about the same difference as between Prince Fielder and Aubrey Huff, and no one would trade Prince Fielder straight up for Aubrey Huff. Another thing I have often heard team owners say is that it is not worth drafting a backup catcher, since backup catchers are such lousy hitters. While I agree it is rather painful to spend a draft pick on a guy that you expect to hit about 200, the AAA catcher in Score Sheet hits 150, has virtually no power, and almost never walks. So his slugging average and on-base percentage are also well below 200. Even the worst real catcher is going to have an on-base percentage over 250 and a slugging percentage of 300 or more, or they're just not going to stick in the major leagues. So if you find yourself in round 29 or 30 and you still only have one catcher, even if the catchers left are really a pretty miserable bunch, I would draft a couple of them, because otherwise you're basically having a spot in your lineup that is an automatic out. I think the real summary of this is that depth is just plain more important than most people think. One other thing I try to do with that in mind is whenever I'm winding down a trade talk with someone, I try to get him to throw in one extra player or one extra mid-season draft pick, even if it's a fairly lousy player or a pretty late draft pick. If that player just gets a few at-bats some week when I've got an injury, that can be the difference in winning a game. Getting back to the original discussion of trading multiple players for one better player, I usually find myself being the owner who is getting the multiple players. What that means is that often on my team, I don't have as good a third hitter or fourth hitter as some other teams in my league because I've given up my star player. And oftentimes I don't have the best number 1 pitcher in my league. But I usually have the best 7th or 8th hitters in the league. I usually have a very good bench. And I often also have the best 4th and 5th starting pitchers. And all of those players greatly contribute to my team. After all, over the course of a season, the 4th and 5th starting pitcher on your team is going to get almost as many starts as the number 1 pitcher. And your 8th batter is still going to get 500 plate appearances, so those guys can really make a difference. One final thing about depth is the amazing thing to me of how many players and or picks some team owners are willing to trade away just to get a prospect. You know, I see people that trade Prince Fielder for 2 top prospects. When I ask them about it, they say, oh, this guy's going to be the next Prince Fielder. Well, if you already have Prince Fielder, you know, granted it's kind of fun to draft the next Prince Fielder before anyone's ever heard of him, but better yet, stick with Prince Fielder and try to win your league. After all, bragging to your friends that you saw Albert Pujols coming along before anyone else did is really nice. But much better is to just plain win your division or win your league. So don't throw away your chances this year in hopes of getting the next hot prospect, or deplete your roster by trading 5 players to get 1 superstar. Instead, make sure you have solid players throughout your lineup, throughout your rotation, and that you have some bench players because it is inevitable that injuries are going to hit your team at some point during the season.